The hum of machines filled the air of Earth's orbital space station Alpha. It was a normal day for the crew, or so they thought. Little did they know that their lives were about to change forever. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead communications officer, sat at her desk. Her eyes scanned the countless signals from space, a task she had done countless times before. Suddenly, a strange beep caught her attention. She leaned forward, her heart racing. "This can't be right," she muttered, adjusting her headset. The signal was unlike anything she had ever seen. It didn't match any known pattern from Earth or its colonies. Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard as she tried to make sense of it. "Commander Johnson," she called out, "I think you need to see this." Commander Mark Johnson, a tall man with graying hair, hurried over. He looked at Sarah's screen, his brow furrowed. "What am I looking at, Dr. Chen?" he asked. Sarah pointed to the unusual pattern on her screen. "Sir, I believe this is a distress signal. But it's not from any of our ships or stations." The commander's eyes widened. "Are you saying?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. I think we're receiving a message from an alien civilization." The news spread through the station like wildfire. Within hours, the best minds on Earth were working to decode the mysterious signal. Dr. Chen barely left her station. She worked tirelessly, fueled by excitement and strong coffee. After 3 days of non-stop work, she finally cracked the code. "It's a fleet," she announced to the eager crowd gathered around her. "An alien fleet stranded in space, calling for help." The revelation sent shockwaves through humanity. Emergency meetings were called in every major capital on Earth. Leaders debated what to do, while the public's imagination ran wild. In New York, the United Nations convened a special session. Representatives from every nation gathered to discuss this unprecedented situation. "We have an obligation to help," said the representative from Canada. "It's what we would hope for if we were in their position." "But what if it's a trap?" the Russian delegate countered. "We know nothing about these aliens or their intentions." Debates raged on for hours. Meanwhile, scientists around the world worked frantically to learn more about the alien fleet. Back on the space station, Sarah and her team made a breakthrough. They managed to establish a rudimentary form of communication with the aliens. "They're called the Zarkon," Sarah reported to Commander Johnson. "Their fleet consists of 5 massive ships. They've been stranded for what translates to about 3 Earth years." Johnson nodded, his face grave. "And their situation?" Sarah's expression turned grim. "Critical, sir. Their life support systems are failing. Without help, they estimate they have less than 2 Earth months left." The news added urgency to the global discussions. Finally, after days of debate, a decision was reached. Humanity would attempt a rescue mission. Preparations began immediately. The best engineers, scientists, and astronauts were recruited. Ships were retrofitted with experimental technology in hopes of reaching the alien fleet in time. As the rescue fleet prepared to launch, excitement and fear gripped the planet. News channels broadcast continuous coverage. People gathered in homes and public squares, their eyes glued to screens. On launch day, millions watched as the rescue ships lifted off. Sarah Chen, now part of the mission, felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as her ship broke free of Earth's atmosphere. As they journeyed into the unknown, Sarah thought about the incredible situation they were in. Humanity, once alone in the universe, was about to meet its first alien civilization. And not just meet them, but save them from certain doom. The rescue fleet pushed deeper into space, towards the source of the distress signal. They were embarking on the greatest adventure in human history. The fate of an alien race hung in the balance, and with it, the future of interstellar relations. As the blue marble of Earth faded behind them, Sarah whispered to herself, "Let's just hope we're not too late." The journey had begun. Humanity was reaching for the stars, not in conquest, but in friendship and aid. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, humans and aliens alike. The human rescue fleet moved through the vastness of space. After weeks of travel, They finally approached the coordinates of the alien distress signal. Excitement and tension filled the air on the lead ship, HS Hope. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the main screen. Suddenly, 5 massive shapes appeared in the distance. The alien fleet had been found. "My God," whispered Commander Johnson. "They're huge." The alien ships were unlike anything humans had ever seen. They looked like giant silver leaves, each as big as a small city. Their surfaces shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Sarah's hands shook as she activated the communication system they had prepared. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the human spaceship Hope. We come in peace and offer assistance." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a reply came. The voice was oddly melodic, speaking in a mix of chirps and whistles. The computer translated. "Greetings, humans. We are the Zarkon. We thank you for answering our call." A cheer went up on the bridge. First contact had been made. Over the next few hours, the human ships moved closer to the alien fleet. Plans were made to dock with the largest Zarkon ship for face-to-face meetings. As the airlocks connected, Sarah felt her heart racing. She was part of the first team to board the alien ship. With a hiss, the door opened. The sight that greeted them was breathtaking. The Zarkon stood before them, tall and slender. Their skin shimmered like the surface of their ships, and they had 4 arms. But it was their eyes that caught Sarah's attention, large, multifaceted, and full of intelligence. "Welcome," said the lead Zarkon, its words translated through a device. "I am Callan, leader of this fleet." Sarah stepped forward. "Thank you, Callan. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. We're here to help." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Human engineers began assessing the Zarkon ships, while scientists from both species exchanged information. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The first problem arose when the humans tried to enter the Zarkon engine room. The aliens became visibly distressed, their skin changing color rapidly. "You cannot enter there," Callan exclaimed. "It is sacred space." Commander Johnson tried to explain. "We need to see the engines to know how to fix them." But the Zarkon wouldn't budge. Their religion forbade non-Zarkon from entering certain areas of the ship. This was just the beginning of the cultural clashes. The Zarkon sleep cycle was completely different from humans, causing scheduling nightmares. Their food was toxic to humans, and human food smelled horrible to them. Even simple gestures caused problems. A human engineer patted a Zarkon on the back in a friendly way, only to find out it was deeply offensive in their culture. Sarah found herself playing peacemaker more often than not. "We need to be patient," she told her frustrated colleagues. "Remember, we're dealing with a completely alien culture here." Despite the challenges, progress was made. The Zarkon, desperate for help, slowly began to open up. They allowed human engineers into more areas of their ships, though always under strict supervision. In return, the humans learned to respect Zarkon customs. They adjusted their work schedules to match Zarkon cycles and learned which gestures to avoid. As days turned into weeks, understanding grew between the two species. The Zarkon were fascinated by human art and music, while humans were in awe of Zarkon technology. One evening, Sarah found Callan staring out a viewport at the stars. "Your people are strange to us," the alien leader said, "but you came when we called. For that, we are grateful." Sarah smiled. "We're learning from each other. That's what's important." But even as bonds formed, the clock was ticking. The Zarkon ships were in worse shape than initially thought. Despite their best efforts, the humans were struggling to understand some of the alien technology. As Sarah lay in her bunk that night, she couldn't shake a feeling of worry. They had made first contact and were building bridges between their cultures. But would it be enough? Could they save the Zarkon in time? With a sigh, she closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clashes, and hopefully new solutions. The fate of an entire alien race hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. As the days passed, The true extent of the Zarkon's plight became clear. Dr. Sarah Chen and her team worked tirelessly, but each new discovery brought more worry. One morning, Kalin, the Zarkon leader, called for an urgent meeting. Humans and Zarkon gathered in a large chamber on the alien flagship. The atmosphere was tense. Kalin's voice was solemn as the translator conveyed his words. "Friends, it is time we share the full truth of our situation." Sarah leaned forward, her heart racing. She had suspected there was more to the story. Kalin continued, "Our journey began not as exploration, but as escape. Our homeworld, Zarkonia, was dying. A great calamity poisoned our atmosphere. We were forced to flee." Murmurs rippled through the human delegation. This was news to them. "We are not just a fleet," Kalin said, his multifaceted eyes shimmering with emotion. "We carry the last of our species. Over 1 million souls sleep in stasis chambers throughout our ships." The revelation hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was a fight for the survival of an entire civilization. Commander Johnson spoke up. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Kalin's skin flickered, a sign of distress. "We feared you might abandon us if you knew the true scale of our need." Sarah understood their fear, but it had cost precious time. She stood up. "Kalin, we need to know everything if we're going to help. No more secrets." The Zarkon leader nodded. What followed was a flood of information that painted a grim picture. The Zarkon fleet had been traveling for over 50 Earth years. Their journey had been plagued by cosmic storms, meteor strikes, and equipment failures. Food and water recyclers were barely functioning. But worst of all, the stasis chambers were failing. "If we cannot repair our systems soon," Kalin said, his voice heavy, "we will lose thousands of our people." The human team was shocked. They had known the situation was bad, but this was catastrophic. Dr. Emily Wong, the lead engineer, spoke up. "We've been focusing on your propulsion systems. We need to shift our priorities to life support and the stasis chambers immediately." Kalin nodded gratefully. "We will give you full access to all areas of our ships now. We have no choice but to trust you completely." As the meeting ended, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She approached Kalin. "I'm sorry we didn't know sooner. We'll do everything we can." Kalin's skin rippled with a pattern Sarah had learned meant gratitude. "You came when no one else would. That alone gives us hope." Over the next few days, human and Zarkon teams worked around the clock. The humans were in awe of the advanced technology, but also frustrated by how different it was from their own. In the stasis chamber control room, Sarah watched as Dr. Wong examined the alien systems. "It's incredible," Emily said. "Their tech is like nothing I've ever seen. It's going to take time to understand it, let alone fix it." Sarah frowned. "Time is the one thing we don't have." Alarms blared suddenly, making them jump. Kalin rushed in, his skin pulsing with distress patterns. "We're losing power in Sector 7. A whole bank of stasis pods is failing." The next hours were a blur of frantic activity. Human and Zarkon engineers worked side by side, racing against time to reroute power and stabilize the failing systems. Sarah found herself in the middle of the crisis, relaying information between teams. She saw the fear in the Zarkon's eyes, the desperation in their movements. These weren't just aliens anymore. They were people fighting for survival. As the crisis passed, Sarah stood in a corridor, catching her breath. Commander Johnson approached her, his face grim. "Dr. Chen, we need to talk," he said quietly. "I've been in touch with Earth. They're concerned about the scale of this mission. Some are suggesting we cut our losses and return home." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. "We can't abandon them now. Didn't you see what just happened? They'll die without our help." Johnson held up a hand. "I agree with you. But we need to show some progress, and soon. Otherwise, we might be ordered to pull out." As he walked away, Sarah leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of an entire species' fate on her shoulders. They had come so far, learned so much. They couldn't give up now. She straightened up, determination filling her. Somehow, they would find a way. They had to. The survival of the Zarkon depended on it. The human rescue team faced their greatest challenge yet. With time running out and pressure mounting from Earth, they needed to make progress fast. Dr. Sarah Chen knew they had to think outside the box. "We need to stop trying to understand their tech completely," Sarah announced at the morning briefing. "Instead, let's focus on what we know and find ways to make it work with Zarkon systems." Commander Johnson nodded. "Agreed. Dr. Wong, you're in charge of this new approach. Make it happen." Dr. Emily Wong, the lead engineer, didn't waste any time. She divided her team into small groups, each tackling a different problem. Sarah watched in amazement as the humans got to work. In the engine room, a young engineer named Mike had an idea. He noticed that the Zarkon power systems used a crystal-like material. It reminded him of the piezoelectric crystals used in some Earth technologies. "What if we use sound waves to boost the power output?" Mike suggested. The Zarkon engineers looked skeptical, but they were willing to try anything. Meanwhile, in the Life Support Center, Dr. Wong herself was working on the air recyclers. The Zarkon used a complex biological system that was failing, but Wong had another idea. "We can't fix their system," she muttered, "but maybe we can bypass it." She began sketching out a design for a hybrid recycler, combining Zarkon biotech with human mechanical filters. Sarah moved from group to group, coordinating efforts and translating between humans and Zarkon. The aliens watched with a mix of hope and confusion as the humans tinkered with their sacred technology. Kellin approached Sarah, his skin flickering with worry patterns. "Are you sure this will work? Your methods seem chaotic." Sarah smiled reassuringly. "It might look messy, but this is how humans solve problems. We call it thinking outside the box." As days passed, progress was made, but not without setbacks. Mike's sound wave idea worked too well, overloading the Zarkon power grid and causing a temporary blackout. Dr. Wong's hybrid recycler produced air that was breathable but smelled like rotten eggs. Back to the drawing board, Wong sighed, but her eyes sparkled with determination. The biggest challenge remained the stasis chambers. Millions of Zarkon slept in these pods, their lives hanging in the balance. The human team had been careful not to disturb them, but now they had no choice. Sarah stood with Callan as they prepared to open one of the chambers. "We need to understand how they work," she explained gently. "It's the only way to save them." Callan's skin turned a deep blue, a sign of deep emotion. "This one contains my life mate," he said softly. "Please, be careful." The chamber hissed open. Inside, a Zarkon floated in a shimmering liquid. Dr. Wong scanned it with human and Zarkon devices alike. "It's incredible," she breathed. "The liquid is like a supercoolant, but it also provides nutrients. If we could reproduce this." Suddenly, alarms blared. The Zarkon in the pod began to stir. "We're losing stasis," a Zarkon scientist cried out. What happened next was a blur of action. Human and Zarkon worked side by side, desperately trying to stabilize the pod. Sarah found herself holding unfamiliar tools, following Dr. Wong's rapid-fire instructions. After intense minutes that felt like hours, the alarms fell silent. The Zarkon in the pod settled back into its deep sleep. Callan's skin rippled with relief patterns. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. Dr. Wong nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "And now we know how the pods work. We can start repairing the others." As news of the breakthrough spread, spirits lifted throughout the fleet. Humans and Zarkon alike felt a renewed sense of hope. But Sarah knew they weren't out of the woods yet. As she wrote her daily report to Earth, she chose her words carefully. They had made progress, yes, but there was still so much to do. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah stood at a viewport, gazing at the stars. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Colin. "Your people continue to amaze us," the Zarkon leader said. "We had lost hope, but you have given it back to us." Sarah smiled. "That's what humans do best. We don't give up, especially when others need us." As they stood there, an odd pair against the backdrop of space, Sarah felt a sense of pride. Human ingenuity was making the impossible possible. They were not just saving lives. They were bridging the gap between two vastly different species. The journey ahead was still long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time since they arrived, Sarah truly believed they would succeed. Humanity's greatest strengths, creativity, determination, and the ability to work together, were shining brightly in the darkness of space. The initial burst of progress had given both humans and Zarkon a glimmer of hope. But as days turned into weeks, that hope began to fade. The challenges they faced seemed to multiply with each passing hour. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the Zarkon fleet's main control room, surrounded by screens displaying various warning signals. The sight made her stomach churn. "Status report," Commander Johnson demanded, his voice tense. Dr. Emily Wong, looking exhausted, stepped forward. "Sir, we're making progress, but not fast enough. The Zarkon's resources are depleting rapidly." Callan, the Zarkon leader, joined them. His skin was a dull gray, a sign of deep worry. "Our food synthesizers are failing. We have perhaps 2 Earth weeks of supplies left." Sarah's mind raced. They had been so focused on the stasis pods and life support systems that they had overlooked this critical issue. "That's not all," Callan continued. "Our ship's outer hull is degrading faster than we anticipated. The cosmic radiation in this sector is more intense than we've ever encountered." The news hit the human team like a physical blow. They had been working nonstop, pushing themselves to the limit. Now it seemed that their best might not be good enough. Commander Johnson's face was grim. "We need solutions, people. Fast." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The human team split into groups, each tackling a different crisis. Sarah found herself bouncing between teams, coordinating efforts and trying to keep morale up. In the food production area, a young botanist named Aisha had an idea. "We can't fix their synthesizers," she explained to Sarah, "but what if we set up hydroponic gardens? We have seeds from Earth, and some of them might be compatible with Zarkon biology." Sarah nodded eagerly. "Do it. Use whatever space you need." Meanwhile, Dr. Wong and her engineering team were working on the whole problem. They had developed a patch using a combination of human and Zarkon materials, but applying it in the vacuum of space was proving challenging. "We need to send people out there," Wong said during a tense meeting. "It's risky, but we don't have a choice." As preparations for the spacewalk began, a new crisis emerged. One of the larger stasis chambers malfunctioned, threatening the lives of thousands of sleeping Zarkon. Sarah rushed to the chamber with Colin. The scene was chaos, with alarms blaring and both species working frantically to stabilize the system. "We're losing them," a Zarkon scientist cried out. In that moment, Sarah made a split-second decision. "Reroute power from the neighboring chambers," she ordered. "It might destabilize those pods, but it'll save more lives in the long run." Callan looked at her, his eyes wide. "That is incredibly risky." "Do we have a choice?" Sarah asked. After a moment's hesitation, Callan gave the order. The next few minutes were the longest of Sarah's life, but slowly the alarms quieted. They had saved the majority of the pods, but at a cost. Several hundred pods had failed completely. As the crisis passed, Sarah slumped against a wall, emotionally and physically drained. Callan approached her, his skin now a deep blue of sorrow. "We lost 517 souls," he said quietly, "but you saved over 10,000. Thank you." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. The weight of those lost lives pressed heavily on her. Outside the ship, the hull repair mission was underway. Sarah watched on a screen as human and Zarkon astronauts worked together, applying the experimental patch. It was dangerous work, but it was their only hope. In the makeshift gardens, Aisha and her team planted the first seeds. It would take time for them to grow, time they might not have. But it was a start. As another day came to an end, Sarah stood at her favorite viewport. The stars seemed cold and distant now, reminding her of how far they were from home, from help. Commander Johnson joined her. "Earth is getting impatient," he said softly. "They're talking about setting a deadline for the mission." Sarah turned to him, her eyes flashing with determination. "We can't give up now. We've come too far." Johnson nodded. "I agree. But we need a big win, something to show them this mission isn't in vain." As if on cue, Aisha's excited voice came over the intercom. "Dr. Chen. Commander, you need to see this." They rushed to the garden area. There, in a small tray, was a tiny green sprout, the first earth plant to grow in the Zarkon ship. Sarah felt a smile spread across her face. It was small, almost insignificant in the face of their enormous challenges. But it was also a powerful symbol. Life, finding a way against all odds. As humans and Zarkon gathered around the tiny plant, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. They were in a race against time, yes, but they weren't beaten yet, not by a long shot. The tiny green sprout had given everyone a moment of hope, but reality soon came crashing back. Time was running out for the Zarkon fleet, and Earth was losing patience. It was time for the final push. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center, surrounded by both human and Zarkon crew members. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mix of determination and fear. Commander Johnson's voice cut through the silence. "All right, people, this is it. We have 1 week to show significant progress, or Earth will order us to abandon the mission." A collective gasp went through the room. Catelyn's skin flickered with distress patterns. 1 week. But that's not enough time. Sarah stepped forward. "Then we'll have to make it enough time. We've come too far to give up now." With renewed urgency, the combined human Zarkon team threw themselves into their work. Every available resource was utilized, every crazy idea considered. In the engineering bay, Dr. Emily Wong had a breakthrough. "We can't fix everything," she explained to Sarah and Colin. "But what if we consolidate? Move all the surviving Zarkon to the 2 ships in best condition, and use the others for parts and resources." Callan's skin turned a deep purple, a color Sarah had never seen before. "Abandon our ships. They are more than vessels to us. They are our history, our homes." Sarah placed a hand on Callan's arm. A gesture she had learned was comforting to the Zarkon. "I know it's hard, but if it saves your people, isn't it worth it?" After a long moment, Callan nodded. "You are right. Survival must come first." The next few days were a flurry of activity. Zarkon were carefully moved from failing stasis pods to more stable ones. Engineers cannibalized the abandoned ships for parts, using human ingenuity to make incompatible technologies work together. But it wasn't enough. Despite their best efforts, systems were still failing faster than they could be repaired. On the 5th day, disaster struck. A power surge caused a cascade failure in one of the 2 remaining ships. Alarms blared as life support systems began to shut down. "We're losing containment," a Zarkon engineer shouted. "The stasis pods are failing." Sarah rushed to the control panel. "Reroute all power to the stasis pods. Shut down everything else if you have to." "But that would leave us without life support," Commander Johnson protested. Sarah met his eyes. "We can survive in our suits for a while." "They can't." As the human crew donned their spacesuits, Sarah watched the monitors anxiously. The stasis pods stabilized, but now they were facing a new problem. Without life support, the ship was quickly becoming uninhabitable for the awake crew. Kalen approached Sarah, his skin a mix of colors she couldn't interpret. "You have saved our sleeping brothers and sisters, but at what cost? Now you are in danger." Sarah managed a smile behind her helmet. "We'll figure something out. We always do. But as hours passed, the situation grew dire. The humans' oxygen supplies were running low, and the Zarkon were struggling in the deteriorating conditions. Just when all seemed lost, Aisha's voice crackled over the comm. "Dr. Chen, the plants, they're growing at an incredible rate." Sarah and Callan rushed to the makeshift garden. What they saw left them speechless. The plants had grown exponentially, filling the room with greenery. Readings showed they were producing oxygen at an astonishing rate. "It's the Zarkon soil," Aisha explained excitedly. "It's supercharging the plant's growth. We can use this to regenerate our air supply." With renewed hope, the team set to work. They spread the plants throughout the ship, creating pockets of breathable air. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought them precious time. As the deadline approached, Sarah sent a final report to Earth. She detailed their progress, the challenges they'd overcome, and the unique cooperation between humans and Zarkon. She ended with a plea. "We are on the brink of saving an entire civilization. We just need a little more time." The response came just hours before the deadline. Sarah read it aloud to the assembled crew, her voice shaking slightly. "In light of your extraordinary efforts and the unprecedented situation, the mission deadline is extended. Complete your task, Dr. Chen. Humanity stands with the Zarkon." A cheer went up from humans and Zarkon alike. Kaylin's skin shimmered with joy. "You did it, Sarah. You gave us a future." Sarah smiled, tears in her eyes. "No, Callan, we did it. Together." As she looked around at the mix of humans and aliens, all working side by side, Sarah felt a profound sense of achievement. They still had a long way to go, but they had proven something incredible. When push came to shove, humanity could rise to any challenge, even saving an alien race. The final push had brought them to the brink of success. Now, it was time to bring it home. The weeks following Earth's decision to extend the mission were intense but filled with hope. Humans and Zarkon worked tirelessly, their efforts fueled by the knowledge that they were on the brink of success. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room of the main Zarkon ship, watching as the final systems came online. The room was buzzing with activity, a mix of human and alien voices filling the air. "Life support is stable," reported Dr. Emily Wong, a tired but triumphant smile on her face. "Stasis pods are at optimal function," added a Zarkon engineer, his skin glowing with patterns of excitement. Commander Johnson turned to Sarah. "Dr. Chen, would you like to do the honors?" Sarah nodded, her heart pounding as she stepped up to the main console. This was the moment they had all been working towards. With a deep breath, she pressed the activation sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the ships began to hum with renewed energy. Lights flickered on across the fleet, systems that had been dormant for years coming back to life. A cheer erupted from both humans and Zarkon. They had done it. The Zarkon fleet was saved. Kaylin approached Sarah, his skin shimmering with colors she now recognized as joy and gratitude. "Dr. Chen, Sarah, there are no words in our language or yours to express our thanks." Sarah smiled, feeling tears of relief and happiness in her eyes. "It was a team effort, Callan. We couldn't have done it without each other." Over the next few days, they began the process of waking the Zarkon from stasis. It was a delicate operation, but with the combined knowledge of both species, it went smoothly. As more Zarkon awoke, the ships came alive with activity. The aliens were amazed to learn of the humans' efforts to save them, and curious about the earth plants that now grew throughout their vessels. One morning, Sarah found herself in one of the gardens, admiring how the earth plants had adapted to the alien environment. A young Zarkon approached her, its skin flickering with patterns of curiosity. "Is it true?" the young alien asked. "Did your plants save us?" Sarah smiled. "In a way, yes. But it was the combination of our plants and your soil that made the difference. It's a perfect example of how we're stronger together." As the Zarkon fleet prepared for their next journey, Talks began about the future. The Zarkon needed a new home, and Earth had offered to help them find one. In a historic moment, Callan addressed both his people and the humans. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," he announced, his voice translated for all to hear. "The Zarkon are no longer alone in the universe. We have found not just saviors, but friends in humanity." Commander Johnson stepped forward. "And humanity has gained wise and technological advanced allies in the Zarkon. Together, we can explore the stars and face whatever challenges lie ahead." The announcement was met with cheers and applause. Plans were made for cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, and joint space exploration missions. As the day of departure approached, Sarah found herself feeling conflicted. She had grown close to the Zarkon, especially Colin, and the thought of saying goodbye was difficult. Callan seemed to sense her feelings. "This is not an end, Sarah," he said gently. "It is a beginning. Our peoples will meet again among the stars." On the final day, as the human ship prepared to depart, both species gathered for a farewell ceremony. Gifts were exchanged, promises of future meetings were made, and there wasn't a dry eye, or equivalent Zarkon organ, in the room. As Sarah boarded the human ship, she took one last look at the Zarkon fleet. What had once been a desperate rescue mission had turned into something far greater. They had not just saved a species, they had opened the door to a new age of galactic cooperation. The journey home was filled with excitement as the human crew discussed the implications of their mission. They had proven that humanity could rise to incredible challenges, that they could work alongside alien life forms, and that the spirit of cooperation could overcome even the greatest obstacles. As Earth came into view, Sarah felt a profound sense of change. They were returning home, but to a home forever altered by their experiences. Humanity had taken its first real steps into a larger universe, and she had been there to see it happen. The Zarkon ships, now repaired and full of life, set off in search of their new home. But they didn't go alone. A team of human scientists and diplomats went with them, the first of many exchanges to come. As she watched the Zarkon fleet shimmer and disappear into faster-than-light travel, Sarah smiled. The universe had just become a much bigger, more exciting place, and humanity was ready for it.